Thank you, fellow Zionists, for joining Jewish National Fund USA's weekly briefing. I am Saul Lisbrand, president of Jewish National Fund USA. It is day 166 of the war in Israel. On that Black Shabbat, we were meant to be celebrating Simchas Torah. In the weeks and months that have passed, we packaged and sent Hanukkot to soldiers in the field and support packages for evacuee families. And soon we will be thinking about the holiday of Passover. Through some of your most joyous holidays and even some of our own personal joyous occasions, we all know that every day is October 7th in Israel. Hostages remain, war is the reality, people are still uprooted and evacuated. But as we join here together each week in unity and solidarity, we know the Jewish story is to survive and thrive, to be free, whether we read it in the story of Purim or listen to it around our Seder tables, or watch as 200 of our volunteers travel weekly to Israel. We have tikva, hope, that we will be a free nation with our homeland, Eretz Israel. Our first guest today is Asaf Romirowsky, the Executive Director of Scholars for Peace in the Middle East and the Association for the Study of Middle East and Africa. Asaf holds a PhD in Middle East and Mediterranean Studies from King's College and is co-author of Religion, Politics, and the Origin of Palestine Refugee Relief. Asaf has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, the Times of Israel, Jerusalem Post, Ynet, among other online and print media outlets. Asaf, thank you so much for joining us today to share your insights. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Saul. I appreciate the hospitality, and it's good to be here. My remarks this morning are going to focus a little bit on an organization that I'm sure everybody has now come to know as UNRWA. UNRWA has been the topic of my research, and I've dealt with UNRWA for over the past 3+ decades. And there has been a lot to discuss and unpack when it comes to UNRWA and where it all comes from. Obviously, we've seen a great deal of news about UNRWA of late. The evidence that has been mounted by the Israeli intelligence and the security apparatus, understanding UNRWA's direct involvement with the barbaric attacks that took place on October 7th. And there has been a complacency within international organizations, and specifically within UNRWA at large, and its ties to Hamas. So let me try to contextualize all of this and where it comes about, maybe to try to shed a little light about the anomaly of this organization all around. UNRWA is the sole dedicated organization, to my mind, to the one single issue that has guaranteed that the conflict will never end. All of you, I'm sure, are aware, in the history of the peace conversations, when there were peace negotiations with Israelis and Palestinians, have been devoted to 3 issues: Jerusalem, the disputed lands as far as 67, and the so-called right of return. The right of return is perceived to be as a divine right by Palestinians, and the organization that has maintained and has been the gatekeeper of the right of return at large has been UNRWA. Right of return, just to contextualize, to be clear about it, is the demographic threat to basically eradicate the state of Israel through the right of return of millions of individuals who will all reclaim and basically replace Israel with a Palestinian state. It's not about two-state solution. It is basically the altering and using the demographic element here in this architecture. Over the years, every proposal that has been presented to the Arab Palestinians has been rejected. and the use of the refugee mentality at large has been the consistent narrative of what I would consider to be, historically speaking, the reminder of 1948, what the Palestinians defined as the Nakba. UNRWA has uniquely defined Arab Palestinian refugees, and this is important to understand. This explains the demographic understanding of where UNRWA comes about at large, as anybody who was in mandatory Palestine between 1946 and 1948, and the kicker is their descendants. No other refugee population has the lineage aspect. UNRWA has been very creative over the years, especially in the 60s and the 70s. Muslim lineage is patriarchal. They were able to expand it to be matriarchal, and they've also been very clever about resurrecting the dead, double countings, and so on and so forth, amounting to what UNRWA amounts to today between what they define into their accounts, 6 to 7 million individuals, all claiming a right of return. Just to contextualize it for those of you who are in Israel, Arab Israelis are also considered to be Palestinian refugees, according to UNRWA's account at large. Everybody is a Palestinian refugee, even if you have citizenship in another country. And so that does not negate the fact that you can demand and are allowed to have and exercise the right of return through UNRWA's accounting. Now, what this means also in practical terms is the fact that UNRWA continues to demand and raise money based on this so-called natural growth of refugees. So historically speaking, the United States has been the largest Western contributor to UNRWA in the tone of about approximately $400 million annually of U.S. taxpayer dollars that go into this agency and continue to grow from generation to generation. Under the Trump administration, it was the first time the United States froze those monies. And then under the Biden administration, those monies were renewed, even prior to October 7th. And UNRWA has basically positioned himself as the only agency that has all the features of what this organization should do, from civil servants to education to clinics and whatnot. UNRWA's primary function has been education. The W in the acronym of UNRWA has been kindly translated into education. The R of UNRWA, which is the UN Workers Relief Agency, is really where they have lost their way or their mandate along the way. If you look historically back at the American foreign policy in the 50s and 60s, and when it came to other refugee agencies along the way, their number one primary function should have been resettlement, reintegration, and repatriation. UNRWA has basically refused to do its job as far as resettling refugees. And what you've had here is basically maintaining Arab Palestinians in a stasis for all these years as a vehicle, and I would say as a mechanism to basically stick it in the eye to everybody around the world that the existence of the Arab Palestinian refugees is as a result of the illegal creation of the State of Israel in 1948. So as such, it is the responsibility of Israel and the rest of the world to solve the problem, which is why, by the way, no Arab country, with the exception of Jordan, has ever afforded Arab Palestinian citizenship in order to maintain and sustain their statelessness and the blame on Israel for the reality of 48-49, which is how they maintain the sentiment of the Nakba. I would further argue that Arab Palestinian identity is synonymous to Arab Palestinian refuginess, which is why every Palestinian leader, from Arafat to other leaders till this very day, have refused to shift or accept any compromise on the right of return. In effect, the Palestinians, as we all know, have been used as a pawn, and you can cite quotations from bin Laden to every Arab leader, to Assad, going back to people, to leaders along the way, going back to Mubarak and every other kind of leader, that we've seen in the Arab world, basically making statements as if they want to solve the Palestinian issue, but in essence, they have no real desire to make that happen. They'll use them as propaganda machines, and that's how the mechanism has been used at large. And so the conundrum that has been really put here is that UNRWA has made itself the outlet for all of this to happen as far as the outlet for Israelis to deal with. It's also critical to understand UNRWA is the largest employer of Palestinians. To my mind, UNRWA is a case study of where the client has hijacked a service provider in turn of 30,000 individuals. There are about 13,000 alone in Gaza. The numbers that have come out, involved with Hamas, so I would say it's much more than that, according to the Israeli intelligence, is in the hundreds. But UNRWA at large makes no distinction, which is really, also important to understand as well, between the individuals that they hire. There's no background checks. Actually, over the years, they have refused American checklist and they refused Israeli checklist as far as who they're hiring, which means you could be an UNRWA worker, teacher, doctor, clinic worker by day, and a member of, as we've seen very clearly now after October 7th, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Hamas by night. It doesn't make distinction. Actually, UNRWA itself has admitted that actually it is a sign of diversity and that they have no problem hiring members of Hamas, which is, again, part of the problem of how clearly it was only a surprise to members of UNRWA that the servers of Hamas were underneath their offices. I guess maybe they needed a guest password. They didn't get the memo on that. But the fact is that UNRWA has worked hand in hand with Hamas over the years. However, all of this is a symptom of a larger problem. And having delved into this for about over 3 decades now, I will tell you that we've been aware of this problem for all these years. And the symptoms, as far as the education, the lack of the indoctrination, the incitement, the ties to terrorism, are all symptoms of this larger problem of how UNRWA is configured uniquely to any other refugee organization worldwide. There is a sister organization known as the UNHCR, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, in contrast to the UN Human Rights Commission, which is a sister refugee organization. And in contrast to UNRWA, they define refugees as only one generation. Put it into context, there have been millions of refugees worldwide since World War II. All of us here have our own refugee story. All have been assimilated at large, with the exception of the Arab Palestinian refugees that continue to use this as a weapon in order to keep this alive. And UNRWA has refused UNHCR's definition because UNRWA had the opportunity of being created about 18 months before the UNHCR was created. And so, but if you were to take the definition of one generation of refugees and parachute it into UNRWA today, if you're talking about the refugees of 48, 49, and the numbers in the scholarship differ about 10 to 15%, I would guesstimate we're looking at somewhere between 625 and 715 by the end of 1949. Based on where we are today, you would have no more than 30,000 individuals. And by the way, there's a whole other separate element of all of this. Under the Obama administration, there were attempts to declassify the documents. There was a lot of back and forth where they refused to declassify the documents. But I will tell you for a fact, after much digging into all of this, you're not more than 30 or 40,000 individuals. If that were really the case, which I tend to believe that number, you could call it a full right of return and call it a day. But again, that's not the case, and not the current condition of Arab Palestinian refugees who continue to use and abuse these numbers. So that's part of what you're looking at here today. I would also note that already back in 1952, we've seen comments about how outrageous the whole architecture of Arab-Palestinian refugees. One of the famous quotes in the Zionist corpus was given by one of the first heads of UNRWA in Amman in Jordan, a famous general by the name of Alexander Galloway. And the quote he gave in 52, and I'll cite the quote here, it is perfectly clear that the Arab nations do not want to solve the Arab refugee problem. They want to keep it as an open sore, as an affront against the United Nations, as a weapon against Israel. Arab leaders don't give a damn whether the refugees live or die. Now, that quote was given in the 1950s and was cited in congressional testimonies in the 1950s all the way into the 1960s. My point is that the evidence has been abundant about UNRWA's anomaly has been ignored for the past 75 years. And which leads us, of course, to the outrageous and, of course, most damning evidence of UNRWA's constant involvement with terrorism and the fact that it perpetuates the problem and is a gatekeeper, as I said before, of the one single issue that maintains the fact that the conflict will never end. If you ask UNRWA officials, which I've done over the years, about when will their term ever end, and they will tell you on record when there is peace between Israelis and Palestinians. While at the same time, they are maintaining the one single issue that will ensure the fact that peace will never come about. And this has been the story of UNRWA at large for over 75 years, 7 decades. UNRWA has the opportunity as a Article 22 of the United Nations of the General Assembly that they are based on voluntary contributions. They consistently ask for more and more money based on this so-called natural growth. And they position themselves as the only outlet that can deal with Palestinians. Now, that may be true in their narrative. The fact of the matter is UNRWA should have been long dissolved years ago. There are alternatives to UNRWA. UNRWA, to my mind, has a monopoly over all these services. If there was a functioning Palestinian Authority, and if there were to be a two-state solution, which I don't see it happening at this point in the game, but all the functions that UNRWA provides should be functions of Palestinian civil servants. There is a double dipping that has taken place here between USAID and UNRWA monies. All of this needs to stop and dissolve. Unfortunately, as all of us here on the call are aware, for Israelis and for everybody around who lives in the weeds in all of this, every day is October 7th. As we are 5 months into all of this, there's been a attempt to try to water it down, sanitize UNRWA once again. The Canadians and the Swedes, and it's a kind of an ironic part that Canada was the first Western country to defund from UNRWA under the Harper government and then renewed under Trudeau, is once again re-upping money. These are not going to solve the problems. There are alternatives through the World Food Program. You need to break the monopoly. There are other UN agencies one can use to begin with to wean Palestinian society off of UNRWA and break the monopoly. There is one of the biggest problems when it comes to UNRWA at large is UNRWA is one big black hole. Every time we've asked for an audit, there is no transparency, there's no accountability. They can't tell you how many laptops they bought, how many books they bought. They don't know any of that. It's one big black hole, all saying that you are maintaining and helping poor Palestinian refugees. The fact of the matter is that there's already data that already by the 1970s and 80s, the majority of the individuals that we're talking about today have all been already resettled. When we talk about refugees in general, there is a kind of a Western cognitive dissonance that exists, that you're talking about African countries who are fleeing for their lives with no running water, let alone Wi-Fi. That's not the case with the Arab-Palestinian narrative. They are a bureaucracy that has built its reputation on corruption, co-option and being co-opted by terrorism. But like I said before, which is really the critical part, They are the client. This is a case where the client has hijacked a service provider. Only the leadership at large are internationals, Europeans who buy into the indoctrination. If you don't buy into it, there is like maybe a handful of individuals I can tell you over the years, if you go against the orthodoxy, who have been fired. But we have enough evidence to say that UNRWA should no longer exist, and there should be a plan in place, the beginning with weaning off Palestinian society off of UNRWA services, that the day after tomorrow, UNRWA should not be in the game of providing these services. And that's the tension we're in now. And I think that that's, what needs to be clearly understood for everybody who is concerned about UNRWA. But if UNRWA is that service provider, when there is, in the day after tomorrow scenario, this will only amplify the problem and will also cause more problems. We are at a point now, given all the abundance of the evidence out there, that this needs to stop, and it needs to stop yesterday. But my point is, as I said before, this has been going on for 7+ decades, and there's ample evidence to show why UNRWA should be out of business yesterday. So on that note, I will end, and if there are any questions, I'm happy to tackle them. But I thank everybody for your time.
Well, first of all, Asaf, I will tell you your words, at least for me, I found them to be concise and very educational. So we appreciate that. We're a little short on time, but we have a lot of questions. I am going to just reveal one of the questions to you, and that's besides Gaza, where else does UNRWA operate? Any other countries?
Yeah, so UNRWA their UNRWA offices in Lebanon and Syria. Predominantly the area in the Palestinian areas is where they've been operating. But the majority of the operations are within the Palestinian areas. Ironically, when the civil war was happening in Syria and Palestinians were fleeing towards the offices in Lebanon, they shut them down and said, no, we can't take care of you. So even there's a gold standard of refugee status, even within the Arab world, when it comes to the gold standard of maintaining and sustaining Arab-Palestinian refugees.
Great. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us today. I do want to note that Asaf is a member of the JNF Global Speakers Bureau, and you can reach out to us to help bring him to your community. Visit us at jnfglobalspeakers.org. So thanks again, Asaf.
Thank you so much.
Our next guest is Mitchell Rosenzweig, JNF USA's Chief Financial Officer. Many of you know Mitch, as he oversees the growth and management of fiscal resources to carry out JNF USA's life-changing initiatives in Israel, advancing the organization's reputation as one of the most fiscally transparent and efficient nonprofits in the country. Mitch is joining us live from Israel. So Mitch, take it over.
Thank you, Saul, and I apologize for being on this call from the car. However, I'm outside the State Road playground. And the good news is I couldn't be inside the State Road playground because of all the noise from the kids that you hear. So 15 years after the State Road playground opened on Purim with a Purim carnival, it is now, as we look to celebrate Purim, again, filled with kids. We had hoped that there would be no need for the State Road indoor playground, which was refortified with as a shelter, but we are still in that situation where we need shelter from what has happened and transpired since October 7th. It's been a roller coaster of emotions these past few days. I've been in Israel since Monday, meeting with the various communities where JNF is looking to put resources into its Rebuild Together campaign. First, on Monday, I was in the Eshkol region meeting with members of Kibbutz Kisufim. We met with General Tal Shaul, community leader. This community has not come back. Met with members of the community. One gentleman whose grandmother was a Holocaust survivor in her 90s who was brutally murdered on October 7th. We were at Kibbutz Nir Oz, a community of 400 members, with 117 either brutally murdered or kidnapped. It's very eerie to walk through the kibbutz with the amount of damage that you see to the homes, to the property, knowing that people had been murdered in these homes. And it's just a very, very tough feeling to walk through. We stood on the balcony of a 95-year-old resident who had been killed. His aide was kidnapped into Gaza and then later released. We visited with the community of Tzochar. This is a community that JNF is going to be rebuilding and developing over the beginning in May. It's a community of 500. We're going to be doing a complete makeover and facelift to this community as part of the rebuild campaign. A heroic battle was a few yards down the road, which held off infiltration into this kibbutz. However, it's in order to get everyone to return. We're trying to make that kibbutz more pleasant for people to come back to. We met with the leadership of Chalutza, where one of the major initiatives of the community center for the Eshkol region will be located, and hopefully construction will restart again in that area. Of course, there's a shortage of construction workers, along with due to the foreign workers not being allowed back into Israel from the Palestinian territories, and those foreign workers that fled during the time of the October 7th war started. Our second day had a little resemblance of some normalcy in the work of JNF. We were in Beersheba and we saw the beautiful Ashalim campus, Must South campus, and where we hope to fill up again with people coming to the Must School, to Alexander Must School. We met with the people who are getting the campus ready for the return of students to the Alexander Must High School program in Israel. We also had yesterday the Mitzpeh Ramon opening of the hub, which was amazing. It's been a project of JNF for the last 5-6 years. We opened the hub early for members of evacuees who are relocated to Mitzpeh Ramon, who now have a place to come to and work, shared space, to be able to meet with other people who can help them as they return to some normalcy as well. Today was another day filled with very difficult emotions. We visited Sha'ar HaNegev region, where our friend Mayor Ophir Lipstein was murdered. However, the community has taken on upon itself working with a strategic plan, moving forward, taking Ophir's vision at first at Kfar Aza, where he lived and was murdered, unfortunately, and moving forward with members of his team in development of the athletic center, the hydrotherapy center for the region, which will provide a way for people to have a place of respite and activities for the entire region. We were at Kibbutz Or Haner, which was a JNF volunteers, one of the previous volunteer trips, redid some of the work there, painted, did the gardening, created a beautiful community garden. And of course, I met up with one of the volunteer groups from this week at the Nova Festival site in Re'im, where we had our scribe from our Being Scribe program from the Masada come to the Nova Festival site, and members of the JNF volunteer group had the honor and privilege to write a letter in a Torah symbolizing life and one of the parshiot of Genesis, symbolizing new beginnings. And even though many people were murdered on the site at Nova on Simchat Torah, when we finished the Torah, we showed Hamas that we are beginning again in our Torah, and it is a new beginning for everyone here in the region. Anything else?
Well, we're waiting for you to tell us if there's anything else.
Well, tomorrow is going to be another busy day. I'll be at the Hoda Sharon campus, and we'll be meeting with people and hopefully getting that campus ready to welcome back students, because that's our focus of rebuilding together and bringing everyone back and bringing some normalcy back to Israel.
So, Mitch, are you really sitting right outside of the playground?
I really am.
Is there any way we can embed you like they do on the newscasts? Embed you inside there? Can you take the phone and walk inside so we can see what's going on?
For sure. It might be noisy,
Well,
but
that's what we want. We want
all
that.
right. Here we see kids coming out. We have security who are watching it. You hear the noise in the distance. You see people here. It's truly an amazing place.
Oh yeah, now we can see.
They're getting ready to clean up, but it was filled with kids, and you see kids coming and leaving, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. All right, Mitch. Well,
Yeah.
thanks for your time. And be safe, and we'll see you back here soon. So, just for everyone to learn more on the impact. Let's see if we can mute Mitch. All right, great. To learn more on the impact you're having on the ground, visit jnf.org/support Israel. As always, we encourage you to travel to Israel with us on a volunteer working mission. We continue to sell out these missions and have added dates through December of this year. Visit jnf.org/volunteer-il to learn more and to register. Finally, sign up now for our global conference for Israel. This has always been the place to be for supporters of Israel, but this year it will be the biggest Zionist reunion. Join us in Dallas, Texas, November 14th through 17th. Visit jnf.org/global to register today. With that, we will see you next Wednesday, March 27th at the same time. I'm Israel Chai.